Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Adam, a third year osteopathic medical student studying here in the United States, and for some reason decided I wanted to share with you all how I survived getting through med school through all the lectures, exams, step one, and in the future, step two. So buckle up, we got a long journey ahead of us. Let's go. So I just finished taking step one and level one over the summer, and in preparation for starting my clinical rotations, started doing some research to figure out how did future third year medical students make it through rotations. This is something that I did for first year and second year using Reddit, Student Doctor Network, and a bunch of other different blogs that I could find to figure out what were people using and how are they studying to make it through lectures, exams, and eventually step or level one. So why can't I find anything for step or level two? I think it's because a lot of this is more personal, but what I did realize throughout orientation is that's all that my fellow classmates were asking the upperclassmen. How did you study for your COMAT exams or your shelf exams? How did you start studying for level or step two? How much of your ward knowledge was able to be applied to these exams? Were you using Anki? What apps were you using? What resources were you using? On and on and on. Not a lot of what was your favorite experience during rotations? Because we all know that we're going to get those. But what we don't know and can't find is exactly how to study and get through these next 2 years. So why should I be the one to share all of my workflows with you guys? Well, in my first couple of years of med school, I had a bunch of my fellow classmates coming up to me asking how I was using Anki and all these other resources to pretty much teach myself what was being taught during lecture without really paying a ton of attention to lecture. And so I decided that if all these people wanted to know how I was studying for my first and second year, then why wouldn't people want to know how I'm studying for third and fourth year? And why wouldn't other med students want to know how their fellow classmates or the people that have gone before them gotten through these 4 years of medical school? So that's why I decided, take it or leave it, I'm going to share it with you. And I hope that you guys can take some aspects of what I'm doing and implement it into your own scheme. So even though I'm going to be actively studying for the COMAT exams after each of my core rotation, the MD version is a shelf exam, I do still plan on talking about how I got through all of the exams during med school in my first 2 years, and then how I studied for step one and level one. Now, I know that step one is moving to pass-fail starting as early as 2022. So it is going to change how future classes study and prepare for that exam. However, my personal opinion is that you're still going to need to have that foundational knowledge just to make you a competent physician. So I wouldn't really change too much how I would study, even though you may not be getting a 3-digit score like those before you. Since I'm about to start my internal medicine rotation here in a couple of days, my videos are going to first talk about how I got through lectures and step one, and then it will also have a little bit of how I'm preparing for the COMAT exam that I will be taking in 2 months for internal medicine. Now, I am, first of all, a full-time medical student, but I'm hoping that I can get some videos out hopefully once a week. And as long as you guys keep commenting and giving me new topics and new suggestions, I should be able to keep that schedule up and running as long as med school doesn't get in the way. So like I said, if there are certain topics or even certain resources or apps that you guys want me to look into and maybe do a quick review on, and maybe some opinions on how I could see it being implemented into a study workflow, just let me know in the comments below, and I'll be sure to take a look at those as often as I can. And you guys are really going to drive the pathway that this YouTube channel takes in the end. If you're in med school already and you haven't heard of the app Anki, then you're either living under a rock or going to a med school that doesn't exist, because it seems to be one of the most popular apps being used among medical students in the last 5 to 10 years. I personally started using Anki and I love it. My brain has pretty much wired itself to where unless something is in an Anki style format, I'm not really going to have a great time of learning it. This is because I started using Anki probably within the first 2 weeks of starting medical school. I started off making my own cards based on the PowerPoint slides and lecture, but very quickly found that the pre-made decks by Bros and Cephalon, LOL Not a Cop, and even the Zonky decks were made based off resources that I already planned to use to supplement or learn from lecture. So I ditched making my own cards to have the time available to me and started using the pre-made decks and never looked back. Anki works by having a spaced repetition algorithm that allows you to see certain topics in time intervals to help diminish the forgetting curve. So for instance, if you see a topic the very first time or a flashcard the very first time, and say that you know it really well, you can push it away to see it again the next day. Or maybe you need to see it one more time after looking at some of the material so that you understand the card better, but you want to see it again in 20 minutes. Depending on your settings, you can have both options be available to you. Now the nice thing is that as you keep progressing and the next day you see that card, you're able to push it away for 3 days and then 5 days and so on and so forth. And this is going to help diminish the forgetting curve, which pretty much states that after learning or seeing a topic for the first time, without additional reviews of that topic, the amount of information that you remember will decrease exponentially over time. Now, the biggest trap that I see most students getting into when they use Anki is strictly memorizing everything on the card. And Anki's great for memorizing, and some things you just can't get away from memorizing in med school. But there are a lot of concepts that you need to truly understand in order to make the connections to be a good physician. So my biggest forewarning if you plan on using Anki is find a way in your workflow to actually understand and learn the material before using Anki as more of an enforcing tool to really hammer down the details and diminish that forgetting curve. So like I said, I'm a huge user of Anki, and I'm definitely going to be using it within most of my workflows on all of these videos. So I'm not going to be doing a lot of tutorials in terms of what your settings should be, what add-ons, and the true inner workings of Anki. I'm mostly going to be showing how I use it within my workflows. The reason I'm not going to be making these videos is that the On King already has a wonderful YouTube playlist with hundreds of videos that can give you the information you need to really learn how to use Anki. I do recommend two of his playlists, the Highest Yield playlist and Anki 101 Basic Skills. He also has a website that kind of goes over all the decks that he has made and some of the settings and tutorials that he has made as well. And all of those links will be in the description below. So before watching some of my videos on workflows, I highly recommend, if you aren't familiar with Anki, that you take a look at both his webpage and his YouTube channel and kind of familiarize yourself with Anki before jumping in. The second application that I'm going to be using in a lot of my workflows is called Notion. And if you've ever used any sort of note-taking app like Evernote or OneNote, then you're going to get used to using Notion pretty quickly. It allows you to build your second brain by having databases, just pages of normal notes, bullets, toggles, a web clipper, and a lot more. I pretty much call it OneNote on steroids. So I use Notion in my first 2 years mostly for lecture and a very little bit for step 1 and level 1 studying. My hope is to really amp up my Notion usage during my 3rd and 4th years by having a database of all these different disease states or topics that I can research and take notes on and then access on my iPad or iPhone, since Notion is available on all iOS devices. Now, the cool thing about Notion, like I said before, is it also has a web clipper, so I'll even be able to hyperlink a lot of the sources that I use. Say it's a actual research article on PubMed, or maybe it's just an up-to-date article. I can reference both of those so that I can look at them later, whether it be at the hospital or maybe at home. Similar to Anki, I'm not going to be really making any videos on the true tutorial part of using Notion. They have a great YouTube channel as well, which I will have the link in the description below. And they also have a pretty nice website that shows you all the shortcuts and gives you all the templates and allows you to kind of get a bird's eye view of what Notion can do for you. I will be showing, again, how Notion fits into my workflows, and that's the type of stuff that I think you guys will care about more. So make sure that you go and check out Notion's webpage and the YouTube channel, and like I said, those will be in the links below, before you start diving into my workflow videos so that you can familiarize yourself with Notion and jump right into the workflow. Over these past 2 years of medical school, I have utilized a lot of resources already. Amboss, UWorld, Sketchy, Pathoma, Osmosis, Cram Fighter, Boards and Beyond, and probably more that I can't remember at the time. My biggest suggestion for you before choosing which resources to use is do your research. You're just going to have to figure out which one you think is going to be the best fit for how you learn. For instance, Pathoma I used exclusively for pathology, since Dr. Sitar is a genius at explaining pathology in a simple and concise way. Sketchy is your one-stop shop for learning everything microbiology and pharmacology related. It is the way to memorize all those facts that pretty much you have no other choice but to memorize. Boards and Beyond by Dr. Ryan is your one-stop shop for all of the concise information coming out of first aid that really helps you to solidify and get a good understanding of certain concepts. And then UWorld and Amboss are two Q banks that I swear by, especially UWorld, as it is the gold standard for any board studying. So I'm going to have the links for all of those resources homepages in the description below. And I highly encourage you guys take a look at them and kind of familiarize yourself with them before deciding which ones you think are going to be right for you. Now, the pricing I know can be a little scary, but talk with some of your school representatives. If you guys have a student government, try to see if someone can't reach out on behalf of your class to get group discounts, because a lot of these resources will do that depending on how many people you can get to sign up for their resource. And in the end, it'll save you guys a pretty decent amount of money in the long run. Now, being able to look at yourself and honestly tell yourself the best way that you learn is probably going to be the hardest part about choosing the right resource, because there are so many of them. And I definitely got bogged down in that in my first year, not so much my second, where I was using Osmosis after watching Boards and Beyond and Sketchy and Pathoma, and I ended up just having way too many resources that I kind of felt overwhelmed. I felt like I had a sense of dedication that if I was using these resources, I had to actually use them for every single topic. And that really shouldn't be the case. If you find that you learn really well from Dr. Ryan, then don't go and watch the Osmosis videos. They may present the information in a way that might end up confusing you. So my suggestion is try to stick to around one resource per topic, and then really just dive right into using that resource. It's going to make you more comfortable with them, and it's going to make your workflows move a lot smoother, and you'll be able to tweak it as needed based on different lectures or different blocks of material or different topics. So I'm really excited to show you guys how I got through my first 2 years of med school and how I scored in the 240 plus for step 1 and 650 plus for COMLEX level 1. Now, I am in no way a perfect student, and you're definitely not going to see me with a Reddit write-up of how I got a 275 on step or level 1 or 2. But I think that is an advantage for me because it puts me in the realm of the average medical student. And that means that these suggestions should be able to be used by any level student. Now, my big disclaimer for all of this stuff is that it is what worked for me, and it might not work exactly the same way for you, and that's okay. The biggest part about medical school is to experiment with ways to control the massive amount of knowledge that is being thrown at you, and the best way that your brain can dissect, synthesize, and understand that material. So take parts of it, take none of it, take all of it, but just know that what I present to you guys on this channel may not work exactly the same way for you. But if you're struggling with that type of stuff, or you want different suggestions, or you have some comments for me to look into, then go ahead and throw them in the comment section of each video, and I'll be sure to look at it. I really want to interact with you guys throughout this entire journey and hopefully help a lot of you make it through the next couple of years of med school. So like I said, we have a long journey ahead of us, and until the next video, take care, guys.